Okay. Today I'm joined by one of my former bosses, I think, technically, mentors. Yeah, mentors, and someone that I've learned so much from over the years about brand strategy, Mr. Andrew Barnes.
Hi, Red. It's really great to be here and to connect again. I hope I can answer some of your tricky questions.
Tricky, never. Insightful, always.
Good. Good.
I've always appreciated your approach to strategy, especially in a time where ad agencies were, I won't say replacing, but overestimating the use of creative directors and downsizing strategists. That was around the time when I first met you. And I've always appreciated how you kind of tie it back to the human of it all. That brands are meant to talk to people and connect. And without that connection, there is no anything else. Even in the people who I help in their branding, has also kind of helped us stay to the humanity of branding. So I guess I just want to start with that macro shift in branding and strategy. When it comes to brand strategy and how it has evolved from static logos to entire ecosystems, from your perspective, what have been the most pivotal shifts in branding over the last decade or so?
I think you're quite right. While you say creative directors, I think, and this is an aside comment, I think there's been a fairly pervasive or widespread erosion of real creative advertising, especially in South Africa, and a lot of it has devolved into what is perhaps more aptly described as sales-driven marketing. And I was looking on LinkedIn the other day, and I saw some comments from some older creative people who were also critical of the creative output, saying we do a lot of navel gazing these days, and we tend to look at ourselves and then all get in a huddle and applaud ourselves, and we forget that we're not the market. There's a market out there,
Exactly.
And we have to really think in their terms with regard to our messaging and our brand positioning. So, as to your question, what has changed? I think the biggest, most pervasive change, the most obvious change, which we can all see, and it's pretty obvious answer, is digital transformation. It was only a couple of years ago that the possibility of personalized one-to-one messaging was becoming possible on a mass scale. So it's like mass marketing, but on a one-to-one personal level. And this has been a major shift that I think a lot of agencies, a lot of marketers, and indeed a lot of brands have struggled to cope with. We have what I've called ubiquitous connectivity. We connect it all the time. And the big takeout here is that consumers, I don't really like that word, but people that we're trying to sell to, they have instant knowledge. They know everything, sometimes sooner than we as the marketers know. And this is a very important shift. We've seen a shift to consumer power. And with that has come, and I think we'll get onto these issues a little later in this chat, with this has come a need for advertisers to reconfigure not only how they reach consumers, but how they plan their messaging. They are powerful in terms of knowledge.
Back in the day, now that you thought about it, it was trickle down was the prominent trend force. So the brands, the business people, the people behind the curtain were able to send out these messages, and because of how centralized communication used to be, and it's more, I won't even say trickle up, but it's more so that now it's like a constant need for catch up and a constant need to learn what's not what's new, but what's now, and how people's point of views, whether politically, socially, are changing. That's very interesting that you point that out. And I think with the rise of AI and AI-driven personalization. Sorry, I've never had to say that word out loud. Personalization.
Yes.
Do you think that that'll make it worse, right? Because I can train my AI to talk to me the way I'd like to be spoken to. I can train my AI to find me items that fit my preferences and aesthetic and everything. So do you think that traditional brand positioning will be made obsolete, or will it just amplify the need for like stronger narratives? Or like first of all, can all brands survive this? First of all, can they hop on this trend? Should they, right? And if they do you think that will make the traditional, how we traditionally communicate with brands, obsolete?
Red, my short answer is no. I think we've forgotten what classical branding is all about in many regards. Mm. And I think we've forgotten because we've become distracted with the opportunities to communicate. As I was talking about multi-screening and multi-channels of communication are available, multiple channels of communication are available. I think to some extent we've got lost in these, and we've got lost in the idea that, you know, we can speak to so many different segments, and we're trying to find out how to address them correctly. And that has taken the focus off core classical branding. So the short answer to your question, from my point of view, would be that traditional branding is not obsolete. I think it's lost some of its emphasis, and in some quarters, people have forgotten what it is. And I'll give you a short example. You know, if you're a bank, we might be able to very accurately and measurably communicate with different segments of our market in terms of positioning our products. And we might be able to talk to one segment that's looking for protection, another segment that's looking for growth, another one that's looking for, let's say, safety or access to products, or even geolocation. Another sector might be looking to be able to access a bank in lots of different places. And we can tailor our message to all those segments very accurately and, as I've said, measurably. Those in turn are not the brand values, and they're not even core brand elements. They communication elements. And then we have to go back and say, well, what is this brand all about, this banking brand? And I think what happens is we get lost in the elements of communication and we forget about the brand. I see it all the time. And the core brand in this case, let's just say hypothetically, and I'm using this just as an example, so I'm making it up as I go along, but the core brand value for this bank may be freedom. It may offer freedom to all its market segments. And that is the core value that needs to underpin not only the brand, but the communication, onto which you then append those different segment messages. And I think this is not clearly understood. And we get lost in segments and we get lost in messages, and we think that is the brand, whereas the core brand has to offer a benefit to our market that goes beyond distinctive segments.
That is so true as well, because I find that people get lost in their chosen communication channel. Like, they get lost in Instagram, they get lost in the YouTube of it all. And maybe it's the instant gratification, the likes on the screen, or maybe it's because it's made it easier for bad marketers to hide behind bad strategy, right? You just boost it. So I do agree with you. I think, honestly, my opinion is that there needs to be a more dual structure. So not too traditional, not too modern, something in between, but that, like you've always said, goes back to focusing on the real life impact that your brand, your product, your presence essentially has in people's lives. And because I mean that is the markup value, right? If people just wanted a toothbrush, they would buy it directly from China, but they buy your toothbrush because there's something in your branding that speaks to them. And if we're not speaking to people anymore, we're just speaking to ourselves in this echo chamber of creatives who just, like each other's posts and boost each other's posts to make it look like other people like our posts and all these things, then
Yes.
like we really lose a lot. I think then my question would be like, in this environment, economy, climate that we are in, with the startups, the entrepreneurs that are coming into and from Africa, how do they restructure, or how do they structure their branding with all these things in consideration?
I think the first thing is to build your brand from the grassroots upwards. What do you stand for? What fight are you fighting? What benefit are you bringing? And from that, start to develop, as your archetype, your messaging, your key values, and your principles, even your ethics, and so on and so forth. Those haven't changed. Once you've built your brand in those terms, you then move to the next level, which is not only defining your market, but defining how you're going to reach it, and what are you going to take to each segment, because then that gets down to elements of messaging. So the key brand principles, I would say, are three things, and this hasn't changed. And the first one is your brand must be distinctive. It must have standout value, so that when people see it, it's immediately recognized as being different. And that's not the message that's different; it's just how it looks, so it can't get confused with anything else. It must be distinctive. It must be single-minded. A lot of people don't understand this, especially with the rise of digital media, is they just cloud all these issues with so much information that eventually we don't know what it's all about. So the brand must be single-minded. And then, of course, the final one, it must be salient. It must solve a consumer problem. It must save someone some money or time or effort. And that needs to be very clearly defined.
My gatherings lately, I'm seeing a lot of young people who are coming up with business ideas based on, I guess, how much money they think they can get, like from investors or the bank or something. And there isn't, like you're saying, like a salient point for this product to exist in people's lives. And I also think that point in this Gen Alpha, Gen Z, late millennial era that demands transparency and co-creation is also very important, because like we were saying, consumers are so honest and have answers so quickly that they also know when something is completely useless a lot quicker, and they're not willing to entertain it. So I think, like, how do you think brands should evolve to meet these expectations while staying profitable? Do you think that it's more about brand building strategies, or like, narrative storytelling? Or do you think we're going back to that, old school, this is the car, this is a car and it drives, like, this is a broom and it cleans? Like, do we hyper focus on being useful, or do you hyper focus on the brand storytelling? Because I think in the past few years, it's been very hyper focused on the brand storytelling, to the point that I don't even know what a lot of things do.
Sure, Red. I think, if you want to be successful, you have to meet a need, and you have to identify that need, and then clearly weave it through your messaging so that people know what they're getting. And if we go back to that very silly banking example that I used, that I just made up, and I said, maybe the core value proposition or the core benefit that they're offering is freedom. And freedom is something that everyone is looking for, or I assume most people these days are looking for a little bit of freedom to get away from whatever the stresses are of modern life. If that's your message, then you have to really doggedly pursue that in all your communication, as I said. But it has to be salient and relevant, and then you have to pursue it. So even with the younger generation, alpha consumers, Gen Z, others, we have to find that need and then use it as a cornerstone of our brand building. I'm kind of amused, when you mentioned Gen Z and perhaps alpha consumers and so on. Marketers have always been fascinated in the youth from the beginning of the development of advertising. They were always fascinated in the youth because the belief was not only that youth has purchasing power, but they can influence their parents and so on. And there were terms such as pester power that came into vogue. And I'm going to be a cynic now because we look at these and we think they're very interesting today, and this is something new, but it's been around for 60 years. The whole brand of cereal-based breakfasts, which was developed in America by Kellogg's, was totally built on pester power. Or most of their brands were built to appeal to kids and get these products into the homes and then become pervasive in the homes in terms of the standard way to eat breakfast. So there's actually nothing new to it, but the branding principles remain the same. And that is, as I've said, distinctiveness, single-mindedness, and solve a problem, offer that. And the youth market is the most discerning. They'll very, very quickly pick up something that's insincere and will kill you for it. We know that for sure.
I think it does. I think authenticity as a word is thrown around, but people don't understand it as as a requirement of interacting with the market. Transparency is going to be disruptive, if that makes sense. Because technically it's not a lie, right? It's not a falsehood. We're not saying lie to people to get them to buy something. It's actually the complete opposite, right? It's be very truthful, and that honesty, people find it endearing and attractive, and that's going to be disruptive to brands that have profited off of the allure or projection of a brand, and not the authentic living of a brand. So I guess my last question to you, because we're running out of time, is going to be, what do you think in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be the most disruptive aspect of branding? Not disruptive bad, disruptive good.
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. Just going back to I just want to touch briefly on the transparency. I don't know what your time limit is. I hope I don't go over it. But on the transparency, I find it quite a divisive issue, because people are calling for transparency, but at the same time, they give away their personal information and they sign up for different things online with no regard for protection at all. So there's a little bit of ambiguity, I think, in what we think is fashionable, and we call for transparency or protection or whatever from others, but at the same time we disregard it. I do believe that will change as we move forward, and the world will become more discerning, and will become more concerned. But it's just something that I'm interested in at the moment. So the next 5 years, that's a really different. So, yeah, go ahead.
I agree. I think that consumer education is very important, and already the more countries adopt things like South Africa's POPI Act, more cyber-specific privacy laws, it's going to be more of a conversation. So I do agree with you. on that. But yes, in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so it's a very dangerous game to make predictions because you're just setting yourself up for failure.
No,
and if you look at the past, we've had so many predictions, and none of them really sort of materialized into anything major. And when there wasn't really a prediction on what the digitization of the world might look like, there wasn't really always a clear prediction. Look what's happened. It's changed everything. We've had authenticity. I think it's really necessary. Authentic brands. I think empathy is a really big thing when brands become empathetic, because the world is definitely becoming more troubled. The absence of economic growth worldwide is now starting to appear. Even China, some forecasters are going as low as 0% growth as things start to unravel in international trade relations and so on. So people are troubled. In South Africa, we have a youth unemployment of 60%. And we keep on speaking about consumption with a very kind of unempathetic tone, where a lot of people actually have aspirations but struggle to meet these. So brands need to not only become more empathetic and authentic, but they also need to start taking a leadership stance in how we navigate this world. But I think the big thing remains for me e-commerce. It sounds so dull. But when I look around, especially South Africa, we are so far behind so many places in the world where so much more is done digitally, and we just don't find things that we want online. We can't get the information. The brands or the companies haven't put everything online. We don't know when they open. We don't know what the returns policy is. We can't get it. Can you deliver it? No. And I think this transformation to e-commerce, which has grown phenomenally. I haven't looked at the latest figures, and there was a little bit of a dip after COVID when brick and mortar retail kind of came back with some strength. But the long-term scenario, if you look at some of the more sophisticated markets, the long-term scenario is that we're going to do more and more digitally, and we're going to acquire these goods and services without leaving our homes. And that is the big opportunity, and we're still very far behind in South Africa. I just see it every day. Really strong brands that have missed so far. There's still time to catch up, but have so far missed the kind of e-commerce opportunity. And the belief is that they can still distribute to stores around the country, and people will go and buy these. But competition is going to eat their market very rapidly.
I think
so. That's a pretty dull answer, but that's what it is for me, because I regard it perhaps as the safest bet.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with you. I think because since I don't live in Gauteng and Cape Town anymore, I'm noticing just how do I put this? I don't think the e-commerce thing is a question of bad branding and marketing. I think it's a bad business strategy. I think it's just people operating off of, these foreign studies, people that don't know how to break down a suburb or a town by LSMs, like saying, going back to traditional advertising, almost the maths and the science of it as well, right? Not just the placement of it too. I think that's also very important. And that sounds so simple, but it's not as easy as it sounds. So I hope that more entrepreneurs and brands do take the time to figure that out. And I can't wait to see more disruptive brands like Yoko, for example. They did that very well. Everything that we're talking about now.
Yeah, Yoko's brilliant, and I use them. In my other little
use them, like literal hobos use them. It's
and they're fantastic. I think they're eating Payfast's breakfast.
Yeah.
But there's some in the insurance sector. There have been some new launches in the insurance sector, and some of their advertising is absolutely terrible. I don't think. Well, there's some in particular. I don't think they'll last because they haven't got a proposition. But I'd like to just add one point, if I can, because I made this as a note. Whereas I say, e-commerce, digital transactions, and so on, as a kind of business strategy, which you correctly point out. But it is also a brand strategy because brands live slightly differently on digital platforms than they do on billboards. But anyway, that's for another discussion. But I think, at a branding level, there's a big opportunity for brands to regain the high ground and take a leadership position. With the rise of digital technology, there was a big move, as you mentioned in some of your notes to me, Red, a big move to co-create, and the brand was actually owned by the market, and they were the key drivers of brand development. I believe this is almost fundamentally wrong, that leading brands are leading brands because they take leadership. Apple never, ever asked consumers what do they want. They had the technology and they worked out what would work best for consumers, and they basically went to market at each stage of product launches and said, this is what you need, and you'll discover that. And consumers did, and it became fanatical about it. Brands have to actually take leadership and, as it were, take the first steps in development of better products and services. Because if they don't do it, the consumers themselves can't do it. If consumers could do it, they would be in a business doing it. It's like asking a person in the back seat of the car without a driver's license and without any knowledge of the area to now get in the car and drive you to your destination. It just can't happen. So we have to establish the high ground with empathy and with some authenticity. But brands can lead because they're the ones that are developing the best products and services to take to market. Yeah. So at an archetypal level, I was going to say, be a sage. I think there is opportunity for all brands to have a small portion of their archetype makeup as a sage. Take some of your knowledge to the marketplace. And I always used to say to clients, if you want to be a leader, then lead. Don't ask someone else what you should do. If you're the leader, get up on the pedestal and lead. Anyway, that's me.
But anyway, I am out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, Andrew.